All 10 episodes survived the 1967-78 junking policy. As with any other BBC drama, the serial was shot with a mix of videotape for studio work and film for location work, meaning the frequent cuts between film and videotape is noticeable, but does not distract to the point of being jarring. To its credit, this serial has a much stronger mix of tape and film than most of the other serials made at the time, but the studio work does dominate. As the original 625-line master videotapes were wiped and the negatives for the location work were junked, film prints are the only existing copies of the serial. Simply Media did not have the budget to perform a full restoration, so cleanup and vidfire were not utilised, and what you see is essentially raw. Given the way the film material would have been telesigned on the tape in the 1960s, the scenes on the prints shot on location are essentially film recordings of a film recording telesigned onto 2-inch videotape, which very occasionally means a lower picture quality, particularly with faster motions. Most of the time, however, it looks fine. The quality of the prints are somewhat consistent. There's the occasional dirt, scratches, almost greenish-grey hue to the monochrome, and also the drop in audio quality, but all of these add to the atmosphere in a gritty sort of way, and make it a more unforgiving and entertaining experience. Episode 1 is certainly of the highest quality. Episodes 7 and 9 are of the lowest quality throughout, although given the 50 or so years age of the prints at the time of the DVD release, the shortcomings are understandable and forgivable, and it's great they aren't more distracting. What helps throughout the serial, particularly its more gothic first, second, third and fourth episodes, is the use of sound effects and dramatic music. A rendition of Symphony No. 3, Liturgique, H1863, Dona Nobis Pacem, which really builds on the atmosphere and mood of everything. The music is at times overdramatic, but this does little to peel away at the integrity and seriousness of the scenes it is used in. As the wind continues to wail and the cold world is all the more shown to us, we see Pip is truly scared of and discontented with the life he leads, with the convict and his peasant treatment of Miss Havisham's family only pushing this further. The house is small, decrepit, and even the dining room struggles to fully open without pressing against a chair and having to squeeze through what is barely a gap. All the sets share this same small and condensed feeling, building on a prison-like feel Pip has found himself in throughout his misfortunes and fortunes alike. The exteriors of his home and in the streets of London, both in studio and on location, are no more pleasant, with barn-like doors and dirty, hollow windows looking into the physically and mentally broken home life of the Gargerys, and overpacked, scruffy streets that make walking a difficult-to-enjoy task unless it's the dead of night. There are some more positive ones, however, such as the wonderfully eccentric home of the Wemmicks, which is beautifully crafted inside and outside, featuring a drawbridge, water wheel, and a gun on the roof, which he fires every day at 9 PM without fail. Alan Bridges brings a very interesting directorial flourish to the table for all 10 episodes. Each chapter ends with a single shot with the eerie music in the background, whether it be a barred window or an anvil in an old blacksmith's shed, and there are countless decisions that build on the atmosphere in the scripts, such as odd camera angles in Havisham's Gothic house and the use of projected light to create distinct shadows from the characters, particularly during the tight-spaced scenes. He was obviously a man who understood his craft and had very vivid ideas on what to make of the serial. Occasionally, a scene feels rather stagey, with the actors remaining still during the fade transition before continuing, almost as if given a cue just off camera. This is less the fault of Bridges and more with the editing department, although given the complexities of editing at the time, one can understand such a mistake, especially since most of the scenes were probably done without reshooting. Scenes such as the churchyard confrontation and Miss Havisham's death require not only strong performances, but a certain visual talent and skill from the vision mixer is required, and it is achieved much better in the churchyard than in Havisham's death, which also leaves Havisham with not even a burn mark on her skin, and leaves that moment, as shocking and effective as it is, rather unconvincing. The inserts of videotape on a scene that should have been shot entirely on film doesn't help either. Generally, the use of multi-camera electronic recordings that move around the studio space with a fair amount of fluidity does work. During the churchyard scene, it allows for many claustrophobic and intense shots of the convict and the helpless boy, and the surrounding wall, statue of a bird, and bushes make the studio feel just as organic as the graveyard scene on film. Still though, it's a pity more atmospheric film wasn't used for the entirety of such sequences, or even the serial as a whole. I've been led to believe that this production was very low budget compared to most, mainly due to the television license going to the 27-part epic The Forsyte Saga, which was airing concurrently on BBC Two. In spite of this, one can hardly be distracted by its lack of scale, as it's abundantly clear that the crew worked with what they had in a way that remains effective even to this day, which proves anything can be pulled off regardless of funds with proper skill. The smallness adds a certain discomfort and claustrophobia which is key to a story where the main goal is to make the viewer think and pull them in. There are some noticeable instances of this bringing scenes down, however, such as when Pip visits Magwitch at Clara's home, but Magwitch is unseen, as is the top floor he is said to be on. Clara dealing with her loud father drunk on rum completely off screen. Another example is the trial scene, which is portrayed through a shadow on the wall and a single hand writing the sentences down on paper, Magwitch being casually mentioned as put to death without a reaction from any of the principal cast. As mentioned earlier, it's down to the vision mixer to make sure the film and videotape elements combine well, which can be hit or miss regardless, but it's down to the videotape editor and whoever was in the recording booth to make sure things run smoothly during the studio sessions. If I could name a technical aspect that definitely falls short without question, regardless of time and budget, it would certainly be the videotape editing, which at times is very jarring, quick cut and distracting, and often takes away the impact of a scene. Great Expectations is the furthest thing from short on great performances. Gary Bond and Christopher Guard's shared role displays both their talents in exceptional ways. There is an excellent scene where Pip's wealthy relatives come to stay for dinner and they are almost comically treated to the tar-watered brandy and lack of pie that Pip gave to the convict. But the fear and regret on Pip's cringing face is evident, and Guard, who doesn't really have much dialogue throughout, is excellent in how he silently portrays the character's emotions with his physical performance, particularly in scenes where he's clearly made embarrassed and uncomfortable by Maxine Audley's Miss Havisham and Francesca Annis's Astile. It's worth noting Annis also plays the adult Astile, which makes for a slightly odd pairing of her and Guard, especially noticeable when the adult Pip is reunited with her. Bond captures the internal conflict, regret, arrogance, stubbornness, and charm of the character from every angle, and the journey he goes through in this particular adaptation couldn't be handled by any lesser actor. Pip is neither the hero nor the villain, and the author almost looks down on him for his more unkind actions, teaching him the lesson of gratitude. While Annis's casting is visually distracting at first, one quickly adjusts to her, and she does a great job at separating the two different versions of the character with her physical performance, becoming more robotic and autonomous as the serial goes on. Her final exchange with Pip in the 10th episode captures every flaw in the character and how her regrettable decisions and experiences have impacted her life. And Annis gives the character so much depth in the way she speaks and tells Pip how she has thought of him often. John Tate makes for a very dirty and menacing Magwitch, but if one pays attention, the way the convict grasps and threatens Pip has an underlying warmth to it, almost as if Magwitch is clutching his own child, threatening him with regret as it is the only way he believes the child will actually listen to him. In between, he even shows some easy-to-miss sympathy, asking Pip about his deceased parents. The conflict is immediately evident within the character, and his tenderness is shown later on when, against more bitter judgment, he believes Pip did not have a role in his recapture, and does not tell the authorities that Pip helped him, instead making the claim he stole the brandy and pie himself. Tate continues this sympathetic portrayal of the character's reveal later on in the serial, instantly hooking the viewer as a much sadder and more sympathetic man than previously believed. Although he is rich and has a father-like love for Pip, he retains his less than sociable habits, such as how messily he eats and how mistrusting he is of even the slightest person, such as Pocket. But this is justified given his on-the-run status. Neil McCarthy gives a very impressive performance, which is finely detailed right down to the way he struggles to make eye contact, to the way he enunciates certain words. Never for a moment coming across as false or insincere, but simply a bit challenged. He never changes who he is and remains Pip's friend in spite of mistreatment from him, right down to naming his own son after Pip. Shirley Kane is convincing as a pushy, bossy, and physically domineering woman, and the first we see of her, she whips Pip after his feeble attempt to hide from her, giving us an idea of her impatience and toughness. She wants better, but she herself is incredibly flawed and lacks any form of compassion, but the sudden switch from violent housemaid to helpless, mute victim of a violent attack brings out immediate sympathy, as one remembers her own childhood was quite possibly nowhere near pleasant. Peter Vaughan, at this point a well-recognised and dependable actor, and Dickens veteran of 1962's Oliver Twist, is perfectly passive and forbidding, riding a fine line between disdain and coldly compassionate in his role as Mr. Jaggers. As the solicitor who informs Pip of his great expectations, he plays a very impartial but stern role in Pip's journey, making sure Pip is fully aware of his actions and consequences, particularly when it comes to debt and asking the right questions for legal reasons. Bernard Hepton, another fine actor, plays Jagger's clerk Wemmick, a much more approachable and amusing fellow who starts off somewhat disjointed, but very quickly unfolds into a friend for Pip and a very charming fellow who loves his father dearly. Of course, Herbert Pocket is a key casting point, and Richard O'Sullivan gives the character a very pleasing, friendly, charming, and jaunty depiction that gives the character an ever so likeable counterpart to Pip's growing attitude, and is always there for Pip in his times of need, rather affectionately naming him Handel, as he rather bluntly does not like Pip or Philip. John Lorrimore's brooding, almost sinisterly slimy Bentley Drummle is a great contrast not only to Bond's Pip, but to O'Sullivan's Pocket, as if to represent the darker aspects of the duo and what Pip lacks in impressing a being as toxic as Astile, who seems to be more interested in what is bad for her as opposed to what is good. Drummle being the definition of that. That's not to say Pip is an ideal choice given his own doomed failure and arrogance, but Drummle is by far the worst of the two, and can easily be named as the official secondary antagonist. Audley's Havisham is easily one of the most noteworthy performances. Her creepy demeanour and motivations wrapped in revenge and bitterness against the world makes for a more tragic and fragile version of the character, but it makes her equally flawed, causing questionable but understandable choices that bring nothing but harm to those she professes to care for. She at one point makes it clear that while her daughter is emotionless, she is riddled with emotion, afraid of her self-imposed isolation, being something of a wicked grandmotherly figure to Pip that struggles to fully admit her unconventional liking of him. Annis as Estella is by no means an angel, but the toxic and rather unfortunate flaws of the character are understandable, given Havisham's treatment. Hannah Gordon, by sharp contrast, gives the warm and ever so wise Biddy a very sensitive portrayal that keeps her within audience sympathy throughout all her appearances. Orlick is often cut out of screen adaptations, and this one retains his shadowy, menacing presence. Ronald Lacey is a villainous actor at heart, and it shines through in Orlick, particularly in his contrast to Pip's more well-meaning if flawed behaviour. Orlick is at his core an ill-intentioned individual, going as far afield as assault and kidnapping to get his revenge on those he feels has wronged him. Although a minor character, Frederick Piper's aged parent gives an almost childlike joy and melancholy whenever on screen, and his scenes are a delight to watch. A simple nod means the world to him despite being such a simple thing, and it gives the audience a reminder there is some joy to be had in old age. The rest of the colourful cast and characters, including the tailor's son, Kevin Stoney's villainous compasson, and Norman Skate's Pumblechook, are all a fine addition to a wonderful ensemble of Dickensian characters. Tragic and grim, Great Expectations may lack the budget and scale of other adaptations, but it works as a brilliantly shot, tightly scripted, and well-acted drama that has these faint glimmers of joy, humour, and hopefulness to keep it from being a completely nihilistic experience. It builds on the novel in several ways few other adaptations have, and presents us with an ending that Dickens originally intended in a way he almost certainly would have been proud of. For me, it's a tear-jerking experience that rarely comes short and never fails to entertain. I award this serial a 9 out of 10. Great Expectations, excellent results.
I must go now. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Astile. Lots more to see yet.